Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing my anticipated releases for the second quarter of 2022, which includes April, May, and June. So I have 15 books on this list that seem to have expected publication dates based on their Goodreads page in the second quarter of 2022, although there does seem to be some movement that happens, so some of these may not end up being exactly published then, but I'm very much anticipating them. I actually had so many more books that I wanted to add to this list, but I'm trying to be strict and just keep it to 15 because I think that's a reasonable amount to get my library to buy and make sure that I get around to reading. So I'm very excited for these and I can't wait to tell you about them. So first, on April 5th, there are 3 books that are being published that I'm looking forward to, starting with High Spirits by Camille Gomera-Tavarez. This is being published by Levine Querido, which is a publisher that's doing amazing things. I'm really loving their work. And this is a collection of short stories, but they are interconnected, magical realism stories about a Dominican family that perhaps also leaves the Dominican Republic, so becomes diasporic. And these are interconnected stories all about that family that focus on family and identity. And I just think it sounds wonderful. Next is A Duet for Home by Karina Glaser. This is a contemporary middle grade that focuses on 2 6th graders whose families are homeless, and they have to work together to try to help out their families when there is a new housing policy that is going to threaten them. I'm really excited about this, especially because it sounds like the author has worked and volunteered with a lot of family homeless shelters before, and I think that this is going to be a really well done book. Next is Woman Eat Me Whole by Asantewa Diaka. This is a poetry collection that is focusing on womanhood, on bodies, on identity, on consent, and takes place in both the US and Ghana, and it just sounds exactly like the kind of poetry I'm interested in. Then on April 12th, there's Sanctuary by Andi C. Buchanan. This is a mystery that is centered on a haunted house that has ghosts with kind of a found family of queer neurodivergent people, and somebody comes in and is threatening their ghosts. This sounds absolutely fantastic, and I really love Buchanan's Windflower series. I have a whole review for that, so I'll link it below, so I can't wait to read more by them. On April 19th, there is Forbidden City by Vanessa. This is set in the 1960s during the Cultural Revolution in China, and it follows a teenage girl who becomes Mao's lover and gets involved in a lot of political intrigue. I love historical fiction that is set in areas and time periods that I'm not as familiar with, and the Cultural Revolution is a fascinating one, so I think this is going to be really interesting. On April 26th, there is Kaikei by Vaishnavi Patel, which is a retelling, probably a very feminist retelling, about Kaikei, who is sort of a villain in the Indian epic, the Mahabharata. And I think that this could be such a fascinating retelling because Kaikei is a really interesting character. She was basically like a warrior princess who became queen, and in the Mahabharata, she's not such a great person, but I think that this could really be a good insight into this very maligned character. Then on May 10th, there are 4 books coming out that all sound great to me, starting with Siren Queen by Nghi. This is set in sort of the early Hollywood era, and we follow a kind of Chinese American actress who is willing to do whatever it takes to succeed, even if that means doing some bargains with demonic magic. So this sounds like it's going to be a really neat setting. Again, I love historical settings, and I love Nghi's writing. I especially love her Singing Hills cycle. I have reviews for the Empress of Salt and Fortune and When the Tigers Came Down the Mountain, so I'll link those below. I just can't wait to read more by her. Next is The One Who Loves You the Most by Medina. This is a, I think, middle grade or YA that is published by Levine Querido. Again, love this publisher. And this is about a 12-year-old who is kind of coming of age and trying to understand their body and their identity because they don't seem to fit into some of the molds that society seems to think is expected. And it's all about them figuring themselves out and also finding purpose and community. Next is Breathe and Count Back from 10 by Natalia Sylvester. This is a YA contemporary about a teenage girl who uses swimming as physical therapy to recover from some multiple surgeries that she's had for her disability. And she dreams of getting a job as a mermaid in a theme park that has these swimming roles. But she knows that her parents, who are from Peru and maybe not so okay with some of the stuff in the US, won't agree. And through this, a lot of things also come out about her family and their past and everything like that. And it sounds really good. Plus, Cynthia at BookWhimsy, who I'll link below, read an early copy of this and gave it 5 stars. So I'm really excited about this one. And lastly, on May 10th is The Women's House of Detention, A Queer History of a Forgotten Prison by Hugh Ryan. So this sounds like it's going to be amazing. It is about a prison that operated in New York City from the 1920s through 70s, where women and trans men and non-gender conforming people were incarcerated, often because they were poor or poorly feminine, and because of just so many systems that are really unfair. Things like because of misogyny or racism, or because of colonialism, or because of sex work, or all these sorts of reasons that these people were imprisoned. And it sounds like the author takes really a prison abolitionist lens in order to discuss this, and it sounds like it's going to be so good. Then on May 17th, there's We Measure the Earth with Our Bodies by Tsereng Nyangtsom Lama. This is a novel that takes place from the 1950s to, I believe, the modern day, and it follows 2 sisters who are refugees from Tibet when China invaded it, and they move across the world, but they are still tied to their heritage, and they end up decades later facing a very difficult choice because there is a spiritual saint statue that has been stolen from their homeland, and they are forced with some decisions about if they're going to try to recover that for their homeland, and in particular their village where it came from, or if they're going to let it, be in some collector's museum. Also on May 17th is Ma and Me by Putsara Rayong. This is a memoir of a woman who is a Cambodian refugee, and she has grown up with really being so thankful and so connected to her mother, who saved her even when it seemed like as a baby she would not make the immigration out of Cambodia. But as an adult, she's really struggling because she's gay, and she knows that this is not a thing that her mom knows how to accept. And so she's really trying to reconcile her love and appreciation and sort of duty to her mother with also her own identity and the way that that isn't necessarily accepted, as well as process just all of this generational trauma that comes with being a refugee. This sounds like exactly the sort of memoir that I'm gonna really love. On June 7th, there's Woman of Light by Kali Fajardo Anstein. This is a novel that is multi-generational, set in Denver, and follows a family of indigenous Chicano people. I am really excited about this because I absolutely loved her short story collection, Sabrina y Karina, which is all about women who are indigenous Chicana in Denver. So I'm sure that this is going to cover a lot of similar themes, and just the writing in that was so beautiful, so I can't wait to read this novel. On June 14th, there's The Grief of Stones by Catherine Addison. This is a sequel to The Witness for the Dead, which I absolutely loved, and it continues following the witness for the dead, Thara Salahar, as he is investigating some more mysteries and some more things going on in his city. And this time it looks like he's especially looking at the foundling girls that are in orphanages who really are not protected by anyone, and sort of what happens when they leave the orphanages. It sounds like this is going to cover some very difficult themes, but also based on The Witness for the Dead, I have a feeling there's just going to be so much heart and gentleness to it, so I am really excited to read this one. And lastly, also on June 14th is The Dawn Hounds by Sasha Stronach. So Sasha Stronach is a Maori New Zealand author who actually self-published The Dawn Hounds in 2019, and in 2020 it won the Sir Julius Fogel Awards, which is kind of like a New Zealand award for SFF. And I actually have a copy of the self-published version that I own and I want to read, and I've been meaning to read, but it sounds like he actually added quite a bit to this new traditionally published version, about 30,000 words, which is pretty significant. So I really want to go ahead and just read this new updated version and see what it is, and also support Sasha Stronach, because I absolutely love every time I've heard him speak on panels. He's really, really thoughtful and just such a good person. So this story is a kind of queer, futuristic murder mystery that is about a cop who is murdered. And then she finds that she's resurrected by some ancient power, and she has to go about finding out what's going on in her city and solve the mystery. So this sounds, you know, really cool. It sounds like it's going to have a lot of interesting magic and future tech and all these sorts of things. And I love science fantasy, so I'm very excited about this one. Okay, so those are 15 of the books that I am really, really excited for in April, May, and June of 2022. There are so many other books that I wanted to include on this list, really truly. A bunch of them I actually have asked my library to buy as well, so I might get to them. But I would love to hear it if there are any books that you're interested in that are coming out in this quarter that I haven't mentioned, or if you're really excited about any of these, or if any of these really strike your interest and you want to read them too, just go ahead and leave me a comment down below.